What if there was a world with only 3 gods that was over 200,000 years old and constantly bombarded by aberrant invasions? Well met, weary YouTube watchers, you hear the words of Skillful Archer, who today goes forth and introduces you to the fantastical D&D world of Drakomere, specifically discussing everything from the unique sources of power for casters to the constructed languages, showing how it all impacts gameplay, increases player investment, and how you can take inspiration from this and add it to your worlds to do the same. Now, Drakomere isn't quite your standard D&D world. First of all, like I said in the intro, there are only 3 gods: Bahamut, Tiamat, and Sardior. Bahamut is the Platinum Father. He protects the world, but his main goal is creativity and keeping history and lore and music and art and all of that. Sardior is the Ruby Father. He is all about wit and wisdom, and he really protects nature. He also appreciates one who's learned. For instance, wizards. He loves wizards. Tiamat is more wrath and justice. She gives paladins their power, and she has basically a prison for anyone who breaks into the world when they're not supposed to. One thing that's different from other D&D worlds as well, there aren't that many Celestials and Fiends, because there are only 3 gods, Bahamut, Tiamat, and Sardior, and they aren't that Celestial themed, they're very dragon themed. So they don't have angels or anything like that, and there isn't that other side with the lower planes as well, with demons and devils and fiends. Now, who cares? Why does this matter? It matters because Drakomere, and your world can too, breaks a lot of stereotypes that the normal D&D world has. If you look at Faerun or Eberron, or even Exandria, there are a lot of kind of tropes that you have, but if your world breaks a lot of those, then it isn't what your players are expecting. Not in a bad way, it's intriguing, it's different. Now, I'm going to talk about more specifics of how Drakomere is different to other worlds. First, in Drakomere, most casters get their power from a defined location or source, and this helps give a type of framework. If your players don't necessarily want to think of a unique way they got their power, it gives them kind of a purpose as well. For instance, sorcerers and wizards, they get their power just from pure creation energy, which is what Tiamat, Sardior, or Bahamut, what they use to create the world of Drakomere, and it still flows through the world. Sorcerers and wizards both had a lot of that energy inborn inside them at birth, or they got it magically from another place, but they're a little bit different, and this is kind of the standard wizard-sorcerer debate. The sorcerers have this power indwelt in them naturally that they can just use with talent, but the wizards, of course, have to study more and refine the skill. Druids and rangers get their power from Sardior, which kind of makes a lot of sense. Sardior loves wit, he loves wisdom, he loves people who are learned, especially in things more natural, like plant history and zoology, which druids and rangers normally are. Also, Sardior loves to protect the natural world. If there's a beautiful forest, he will protect that, and he will appoint people to protect that. Druids are given power chiefly to protect the world, nature specifically. That gives a druid player instant motivation. If there's this cult who's grafting dragon flesh onto humans, making this horrible aberration that shouldn't exist and breaks all natural laws, and you have a druid as a player, that's instant motivation for that druid to go and take that cult down because they are breaking the rules of nature. Rangers, on the other hand, are a little bit different. They're given power chiefly to defeat those who would harm nature. So you might more commonly see these rangers going to defeat that cult. Or if a city is burning down a forest, you'll have a group of rangers going to take care of that situation and stop them. This gives druids and rangers an instant motivation for the campaign, because if they don't have another motivation, then they kind of have this default motivation that you can use as a DM to kind of hook them, because they're a ranger and a druid. They've been given power by Sardior to protect nature. Nature is probably being violated. They have instant motivation to go rectify that. Clerics and bards get their power from Bahamut. Bahamut loves healing, protecting people, making sure people develop into what they should be. Because of this, Bahamut has given power to people so they can do those things for him. Clerics have been given power to chiefly protect and heal them so they don't die before they should, and guide them into what they should become and into fulfilling what they can fulfill. Bards, on the other hand, are given power to keep and record history. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but Drakomere's time is incredibly vast. I kind of talked about it a little bit in the intro, but it's over 200,000 years old. Dragons live to be about 5,000. That's an incredible amount of time, even for a dragon, this ancient elder being. This world is still so vast for them. And because of that, you need good lore keepers to keep the entire history of the world. Who's going to remember 200,000 years ago? You need bards to write it down, tell it in stories and song and music. And again, this kind of gives clerics and bards instant motivation if they don't have it already. You can have this cleric who's trailing the other characters, helping them and guiding them towards what they should be, being a moral compass, healing them, protecting them, and also showing them how they can be a better version of themselves and improve their powers. You can have bards who are adventuring in the world, discovering different pieces of history that they can then keep, and then you're this bard going out with the rest of the party to record your history and any history you come upon in your adventures. Paladins and warlocks get their power kind of from Tiamat. Paladins do get their power directly from Tiamat. Like most paladins, they are given power to exact justice. If there is an aberration who's terrorizing a city, a paladin will go smite it down with the power of Tiamat. So you have a motivation for paladins instantly. Warlocks, on the other hand, they still are quite similar to their normal versions. They get their power from a different being, but for most warlocks, Tiamat keeps all the pacts, and she makes sure that the warlocks aren't signing a pact they don't mean to sign, and that it's at least mildly fair for both parties, and that both parties are keeping their side of the pact. She's kind of like a mediator between patron and warlock. So who cares? Why does this matter? Why does this help? Why does it make the world different? As I've kind of been going and saying, as I've been going through this, these sources of power give casters an inborn motivation that they can use if they don't want to or can't think of another one. And it's just a really nice framework, especially for newer players who don't really have the motivation thought up yet, and they can kind of use that as a backbone. Next, the time frame makes the world really different. Most worlds in D&D are a couple thousand, maybe 10,000 years old. However, Drakomere is 200,000 years old. This is amazing because you can have so much history. You can run so many games, and you can have this really living, fleshed out world. And you can flesh it out as you play games and campaigns in the world. Also, Drakomere specifically is divided up into ages. Every age is about 7,000 years long. This gives a nice structure, and each age ends with an incursion, where it's this aberrant force that's come into the world and adventurers need to go defeat it. And this matters because you can have this vast world, this living, breathing world that you flesh out as you run games in it. And it can have this real history because of all those games. It's not your own made up history. You can have that too, but you have these actual people, not just you, who have gone into the world and made the history. So it feels a lot more real. Not that world built history by itself. It doesn't feel real all the time, but this time it really is real because it's the players going and making this history. Now I'm going to talk about the geographic regions of Drakomere. There are 5 main geographic regions, which kind of helps and separates things a little bit. The first main geographic location is Drakion. There are 20 different cities, each one made for and ruled by a type of dragon. There are also other cities, like some cities in the Hot Mountains, where dwarves and Goliaths live. You have the Neathlen Forest for elves, and you have some fairies living in the Fey Forest. But mostly this world revolves and is built on and by the dragons. And when you're playing in this section, you feel that. You feel the draconic influence almost everywhere. When you're not in a place with dragons, it feels weird. Then you have the Wild Plains, where a detonation of creation energy went off there and turned a lot of the animals into humanoids. So that's where centaurs, Ursin, Leonin, it feels a lot more wild. You have a lot of druids and rangers there. And you can have a bunch of really interesting campaigns there because you can have people traveling there for the first time, experiencing this new world. You can have people trying to destroy it. You can have people doing their own things, corrupting it. And it all has a very different tone to Drakion, which is kind of this more urbanized-ish set of continents. But the Wild Plains, they're what they sound like. It's a bunch of plains which are just wild. And it has this very different tone. And going even more into a very different tone, you have the Twisted Lands, where it's this place which has been corrupted by aberrant energy, and there's only one city, Renth, which is mainly made up of dwarves, Goliaths, and some other people. The land is dotted with these towers which shoot spires into the sky of energy that drive people insane. That is already a very different feel than the other two, and you can run a gritty survival game here, you can try Topple the towers, you can try save rent. Then fourth, we have the archipelago, where it's this bunch of islands with pirates and marine life. You can run pirate games in here. You can run underwater games. You can run a game on the island trying to escape. Again, it's a lot you can do here, and it's really different than the other ones, but it's still in the same world, and anything else that happens in the world will have effects here and everywhere else. And it makes the world feel interconnected, but you can still have these separate geographic regions that all have very, very, very different flavors and feels. Finally, you have the chaos, where it's a swirling pool of water, tempestuous storms, flying boulders that are on fire. It's elemental chaos, and just pure chaos at its finest. There's also a citadel, where Tiamat puts all of the people who break into the world, and that citadel is ever shifting. You have genies living there, you have krakens living there. That area of the world is just pure chaos, and you can run some really fun games there because it's just so all over the place, which again is so different from the other 4 geographic regions. And all of this is really good because in this 200,000 year stretch of time, you can run a bunch of games already, and you can run 5 different games for each of those time sets you would have run those games in, so you just have so many games to run and so many places to explore that are so different and diverse, and it's amazing. Finally, and this is something that takes a little bit more effort and not everyone will do it, which is fine, we have conlangs, constructed languages, fictional languages, kind of like what Tolkien did with Elvish, or David Peterson did with Dothraki. These really help cement the world and make it feel really real and lived in. And if you have players who really dive into the lore, then they'll like see some writing or words from this language, and they'll be, oh, I know that, let me go look at what this means. This really helps make the world feel real, and you can have a lot of fun if you enjoy it, making these different languages, because conlanging, it's a hobby in and of itself, and if you don't like conlanging, I'm gonna leave a link in the description for a site that kind of automatically makes a conlang for you. It's called Vulgarlang. All of these things that I've talked about here, they all make my world, Drakomere, feel really unique and different from your standard fantasy world. And I think you might be able to take some of these ideas and add them to your world and do the same thing. Make the world feel different, break stereotypes, break molds, make things unique and fresh, subverting expectations in a good way, where your players don't know what's going to happen next, not in a terrified, this sucks way, but in a, what's going to happen next, I want to know, I don't know. So now, with all that said, go forth and world build, keep your aim sharp, and we'll see you next time. Bye!